one gives a shit anyway.
Oh, thanks. Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Simon of Savageries and today I'm joined by Scottee, which I'm very excited about.
So you should be.
I thought what we'd do in this video is talk about a few different things that Scottee's books have made me think about that I think other people will relate to. Fat, we'll talk about class, we'll talk about creativity, because I think that's a really, really important one, and also guilt in lots of different ways. But it'll be upbeat and lively, not miserable. Not people going away with like... Bravado is all about working class.
Yeah.
And it's all about being a working class gay kid. And it chimed me because growing up, now this is something that people always laugh because I'll say I'm from a really working class background, which I am. Matlock in Derbyshire is like the Blackpool of the Peak District. It's quite amazing.
I hope it says that on the sign.
When people then find out that like we lived in a really big house surrounded by a forest with pet ducks called Rapunzel. But they're instantly, well, no, you can't be working class then because you didn't have any, you clearly had some money, but actually my grandparents bought their house for literally no money and did it up. But this really chimed me because being in the north as well, everyone always goes, oh, but northerners are fine about everything. They're so much happier and more welcoming. But this talks about how working classes are not always those picture perfect, lovely, warm, cuddly people that we're portrayed.
Yeah, and I think just to go on that point about who or what can be working class, I think there's so much that we need to detangle around class specification. Like there's like rural working class is very different to like inner city working class that I am. And like I've got friends who are what I call country working class who grew up in a house like or thatched cottage, but because that aesthetic has been like taken on by the middle classes
Incredibly.
do you know what I mean? Suddenly like, oh, you can't be common. And the thing that annoys me is it's often the middle classes that are who are sort of trying to dictate whether or not you can be working class or not. So I get called out quite a lot now. I constantly feel I have to justify like, well actually I grew up in accounts like for 30 years of my life and I'm only been around for 33. So I mean, I feel like, yeah, if anyone can claim being common, hiya. But it's always the middle classes that are like, well, you're an artist, you can't be working class. As if creativity is like a pastime solely for the middle classes.
But it's the same with reading. So people say, well, you can't be working class because you read. And like we were just saying actually before we started recording, I have a library at home, which I get a lot of kind of, like if you looked on my Instagram account, it doesn't look particularly working class, I'm aware. And now, I suppose, but it's that thing, I don't say that I'm middle class now. I don't even think about class. What I think about is my modus operandi. Where did that word come from?
I think we might have to put a subtitle underneath that.
My mentality is still working class. I'll treat myself to something and then inherently feel guilty about it because I'll sit and go, you couldn't have bought that how many years ago. So
recognising your privileges now totally is a good thing to do. I come from the world where I don't think you can transcend the bed that you're born in, right? So I think like if I was to have kids with my partner, of course we're both artists, like of course my kids are going to be like the people that I hate. They go, oh, both my parents are artists. Do you know what I mean? My kids will be posh. But you can't transcend the bed you're born in because that has dictated so much about my life and the way that I talk.
But will they be posh? Because with you bringing them up, you'll be bringing them up with that mentality.
Yeah, but no, because they're going to grow up in an economy which is totally different to the one that I grew up in. Do you know what I mean? I grew up in an area which was like the eighth most deprived ward in the country when I was growing up there. I'm a firm believer that the bed you're born in, you can't transcend that class because of all of those life experiences that come afterwards are dictated by that moment.
Yeah.
And you carry class trauma and shame with you for the rest of your life. You know, so you like thinking...
But we're lucky to do it. That's the other thing that's weird, isn't it? Because then you think, oh, I've got all this class guilt, but I'm really lucky to have that guilt, which is a real weird...
Yeah, to be proud and full of shame for the same person, for the same identity is often a really weird one, right? And quite often, I think with working class kids, you grow up far quicker and far more aware of capitalism than middle class kids.
Yeah.
And so I think that stuff just stays with you. Like I often feel like if I get myself a nice thing, I feel like, okay, I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right for myself. I'm not going to go back to that hurtful place that like is the source of so much shame for me. And so sometimes it's like a little marker to say, okay, keep going. but I don't. It's this idea that working class identity has to be around failure.
Yeah.
So the only time that you can like be working class is like if you like it when stuff is going bad. I was going to use a swear there, but I said when stuff is going bad. Why don't we celebrate working class success?
Yeah.
What does that even look like?
Can you remember the first time that you realised that you were working class? Because I remember mine really vividly was when I really met my friend Polly, who I've been friends with since I was 4, and then we lost touch in our teens. And she said she could remember the time we didn't have enough money for milk, so we had water on our Frosties.
It's not like there's been one moment. There's been a series of moments that are often always around the arts, right? Whenever I've like was starting to make work, when I go into cultural institutions across the country, and there's a clear difference in experience of the people who populate those spaces and commission in those spaces and me. And so they'll say things that they'll have a commonality, often to do with skiing.
I went skiing once, Scotty, it wasn't a good experience.
Oh, well, maybe you are posh. There's also a really lovely game that I love, which is called the Working Class Olympics. So it's like when you meet other working class people and you go, oh, what did you do as a kid? Like, what did you do growing up? And they were like, oh, well, we used to go on holidays to Spain. Oh, Spain, was it? Oh, we never left the country. We were quite poor. Oh, the country, actually, we never actually got out of our village. Shoes, we didn't even have a floor to walk on. You know, you stop playing this game. But I quite like that because that's essentially us sort of working out the complexities of class.
So I've noticed some of my family, so when I bought the house that I live in, which is in the Wirral, and as soon as you say Wirral, people are like, oh, Cheshire. I'm like, no, it's Birkenhead.
Yeah.
But they're like, oh, you got a really big house. Oh, Lord of the Manor now, is he? And I'm like, no, it was bog cheap. That's why I got it. It's my pension.
But isn't it weird that we have to justify these things in our lives? I think also as well, like people don't understand, like when you apply queerness on top of class, like something gets even more segue. That brings in a whole other dynamic. But it also means like because we have non-traditional family setups, it means that actually we can often get some of these markers in life a bit quicker. Like we can get a house in a poorer area a bit quicker because, you know, we don't have to pay for children. I mean, if I was that posh, I'd have people coming in painting. I'd have consultants telling me which furrow and whatever they're called, wallpaper. I mean, there was markers in my life where people have said to me, here's another class awakening, right, where I've said things in the wrong way. And posh people always correct you. So the first one was, I got a review in the stage, one of my first reviews, and they said and I said, mediocre? Mediocre. So I was like, I've never heard that word before. And then people started laughing at me, and they were like, no, it's mediocre. And I was like, well, what does that mean? They were like, oh, it's like a fancy word for you're okay, middle of the road. I said, well, why did they put that there? There's a brilliant writer and theatre maker called Selena Thompson who recently said something to me that really took away a load of shame attached to words and books for me, because I'm also dyslexic and like poorly educated. And she said, you should feel a massive amount of pride for when you say words and people say that they're wrong, because they show the world that you're self-taught, that you've gone off your own back to learn something, and it hasn't just been language that's been around you culturally where you've heard other people say it, so then you sort of like pick it up and use it yourself. So I think that for me has been a massive thing of like, oh yeah, maybe I can be a bit more clever, or consider myself more clever.
Linking into queer thoughts, because I always think I'm a bad gay, because I don't really do enough, I don't think, for the LGBT community. Another case of guilt. There's a lot of guilt, I think, that resides.
What is this, therapy?
Thank you, Scottee. So there's this thing about us not speaking out, and you have spoken out, and I thought this links into the book of queer monologues, which Scottee has curated. Curated, there's a word.
Actually, it says edited on the front, but I have edited and curated. Who knew?
What made me think about that is voice, and you've really used your voice, which I think is amazing. But yeah, how brave, or full of bravado, I guess, did you have to be to do that? Or was it just inherent that you wanted to speak out?
So my mum is a major empath, right? And she always taught me, like, if someone hasn't got something, or someone's got less than you, give them half of what you've got. And being compassionate about other people that are around you, and always just trying to help. And so I guess when like I started to have my queer awakening and think, I'm not like the other boys. And seeing the injustices play out. And, you know, I was going to school when Section 28 was in play, you know, this piece of law which prohibited anyone who came into contact with me, a teacher, civil servant, library workers, from promoting homosexuality, right? So I grew up in quite an isolated, scary space where the internet became my solace, going on MSN Messenger and FacePie and finding people who were like other 14, 15-year-olds who were like trying to navigate this world in the same way. Then I started to meet activists who were making work pre and post decriminalisation or partial decriminalisation of homosexuality in the UK, and like being really excited about the stuff that they had done in their lifetimes and that we will continue to do, the magazines, the activisms, the projects that they had put on. And it just put this fire in my belly, and then it was just about me trying to learn what I wanted to say, and I felt like I had to be articulate about that. And then I realised, well, no, that shouldn't be an expectation. Like, there should be more working class queer voices. And I think there was an awakening when, like 3 years ago, someone said to me, who is your role model? So I started to think, okay, who's like queer and working class in the arts? I could only think of Joe Walton. And I thought, why can I only pull one name? Yeah. Like what? And so it made me feel like, okay, perhaps I could be, and the audacity of this, perhaps I could be an ambassador or somebody who becomes more vocal for the other fat queer weirdos.
But I find that really interesting because if you kind of link into the creative side of that, it can be really, really empowering because you can also be aware that you're helping other people, which sounds a little bit Mother Teresa, and I don't mean it to.
Well,
I'm just trying to get a dishcloth.
I don't think there's anything wrong. I think I carried a lot of guilt with like thinking, oh, am I just being a do-gooder? And then actually, I think my stuff's far too aggressive for anyone to think I'm doing good with it. Do you know what I mean? It's far too mouthy, it's far too in your
But that
face.
does do good. Because there's an interesting, and this nicely is a segue into Fat Blokes actually. At the beginning, there's a really quite awkward moment. And the first time I saw it, I was like, oh my God. But it's brilliant because it makes you think. It's very confrontational, but actually I think that can make people really think because I've noticed actually working in prisons recently, it's made me question some of the prejudice. I thought I didn't have any. Duh, everybody has some. But it really makes you rethink, and that's what I think a lot of your work does.
Yeah, I think I tried to make us all understand how we are complicit in all of the stuff that is going on in the world. And I go into that into Bravado as well, where I talk about like things that men did to my body, working class white men did to my body for a period of 10 years. And then in the end, we see how I'm just as capable of the things that they've done to me. So I don't divorce myself from any of this stuff as well. And I think there's something in that for me of us acknowledging complicity that might be helpful route when moving forward.
That's really interesting. I found Fat Blokes so it's really made me think. It's been really, and also you, and I said this to you downstairs earlier. Scott was like, "That's a nice jumper." Well, I wouldn't have bought this jumper if it wasn't for you, because with Fat Blokes and everything, for the first time ever, and people who've known me for a long time will know this is true, I used to avoid colour. I was like, I'm too big, I can't wear colour, I just cannot do it. Also, I did used to really like Spooks on the BBC and like to dress in black. Then I might be in MI5.
I was a big Spooks fan.
My journey was from skinny to getting bigger because of health issues, but it was really, and hearing your story and hearing all these guys' stories is so brilliant because it's about an acceptance, it's about being part of it and also being distanced from it. And what I think you do is you kind of put everything against each other, but in a really positive way.
I think people don't understand. I'm really touched by that story about like I've inspired you to be colourful.
No, seriously.
Because I think it's really quite, people don't understand, it's actually quite tough to be a fat, visible person in public space, because like even just walking here, people are like looking and laughing because you're not playing the role of what society wants as a good fatty, right?
Well, what that was me, all in black, head down a little bit. And interesting, when I started this channel, I got so much, go to the gym for a bit and then come back and talk about books.
No!
Yeah.
Well, look at you now.
Yeah, in my big red jumper, not giving a shit.
It was a lovely colour on you. Would we say that was burnt orange? I'd say it's burnt orange.
I think it's just red.
It's burnt orange.
One thing that I find really interesting is the whole body positivity movement, or body posi, which I'm really not sure how I feel about that term. Now, half of me loves it, but then there's this really weird thing where a lot of my friends are losing weight through their own choice, and that's lovely, but there's this almost fat shaming by accident where they're like, look at the work I've done, look how... And I'm like, good for you, but actually you're making me slightly feel like shit. But that's just me, that's not them.
Well, they're allowed to, because we live in a cultural democracy, don't we? So they're allowed to put up their own bodies. I mean, when they start doing the hashtag eat clean thing, I mean, remember, this is something that I tell people all the time about the internet. You don't have to follow them.
No, but you know, it's your mates.
You don't have to follow them. Because if they're projecting stuff that you find triggering, you can just say to them, I don't need to see this stuff at the moment.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting because it's almost becoming in their pride, which is brilliant. I'm so proud of them for doing it for themselves, that there's almost this accidental shaming, but it's not intentional.
When we're thinking about body positivity, right, I think it's always really good to refer to it as good capitalism, because that's what's being played out here, right? Because these people who are posting images of their weight loss journey are not just posting pictures of themselves like, I've just lost some weight and this is really great. They're posting pictures of themselves losing weight and now wearing like these super expensive clothes.
Or just pants.
Yeah. But those pants are like from somewhere, right? Or like they buy into this idea that self-care means that you have to have this bath bomb and this scented candle.
I'm bad for that. I am bad for that because I love me a Lush bath bomb.
Well, yeah, there's nothing wrong with them, but I'm not going to like pretend that is going to be, if I put this thing in water, that suddenly the systems of like complex cultural homophobia, queerphobia, femphobia, fatphobia suddenly is like dissolving in that water.
Don't happen. Pool of glitter.
No, it's don't happen. I'm sorry.
Don't ruin your bath.
Oh, don't have the glitter ones because you just can't get them off. My partner calls them shiny dirt.
But I see that as a treat.
But self-care shouldn't be a treat, right? Self-care, like those moments of self-care, like as much as I say, like, you know, that is not going to dissolve the world's problems, they do make us feel nice. And you wouldn't think twice in this world about paying 40 quid for a therapist.
No, that's true.
Now, you spend $4.95 on something to go in a bit
Scottee
of water.
around.
Do you know what I mean? Bit of water, hot bath, enjoy yourself. Like, we shouldn't be reluctant to looking after ourselves.
That's also weirdly links back to the working class thing. I couldn't do that as a kid, so now I do it and I properly love it. But then there's always that slight, oh, how much hot water have I used? It's really, really tricky. It's a really tricky, odd
And it will always be with you.
One thing that I love about Fablux as well, particularly, is it's all about finding your gang and your tribe. I've been seeing it twice. Last night I was like, I just tend to just go on and run around in my pants at the end and join in with everyone. But is that the thing that you wanted? I'm really hoping, do you think there might be a Fablux anthology or anything like that at any point?
Oh God, so many questions. Do I want people to...
Can you tell it's had a slight effect on me?
Yeah. No, but I'm grateful for it because, you know, I think there's so much work and artwork that gets made in the world, specifically in England, that is just for art's sake. And I'm really like, okay, let's make stuff that like emotionally disrupts people for better and worse, to think like a little bit different about the world that we operate in, so that we can like tackle some of the other stuff. Like we've been tackling identity politics for a really long time now. What I want to do is like radically come into those spaces, think about them a bit more intersectionally, and then get on with like the planet. I want people to come away from it and to feel like they want to jump up on that stage and like get naked with us, because
not
like,
fully naked. Not
fully naked. We have our pants on, because otherwise, if you
I'm
get
tempted that actually, I should have said fully naked. You'll get loads of people turning up. Woo!
There's something useful in stirring people that much, right? And then people like send us messages, and then you know after the show we meet a lot of people.
Start stalking you.
They're quite teary. Oh, I'm all for a stalker. I'm all for a productive one, not a scary one. That's just a sign, I feel, like it's working, that we're saying things that are ringing true to people. Wouldn't it be awful if I got up there, did a show, and then everyone went, yeah.
Well, you just said that.
I mean, it's never happened.
Linking in something that is around and creativity and everything.
Yeah.
Look, this is Scottee. I made it, which I love the fact it's got two meanings. Because one, you've made it.
The audacity.
I know. But two, you've also made everything and done all the stuff that you've done. And I was wondering if people feel like they want to be more creative but just can't, or feel like they have something to say but don't know how to find their voice. What are your kind of tips?
My mum always gave me bits of scrap paper and felt tip pens. And I think that's a really easy way to start. Something I talk about with like artists and students and participants is to do a thing called morning pages, which is like you literally wake up and instead of spending 25 minutes on your phone, like on Twitter or whatever, you just like get a page and you just write whatever's on your mind. And you take away the idea that it has to be good, interesting or seen. So no one ever has to see it. And then by the end of that week, you might have written like a short play. Breaking things down like that I think are really useful. I think asking artists, approaching creative people
I was going
online.
to talk about asking. I think there's a real power behind asking. I've only learnt that in the last year actually. And it was when I got asked to do something and I was like, oh my god, I've always wanted to do that. And their response was, we've always wanted you to ask. And I thought I couldn't ask. I thought I had to be asked. And actually sometimes you've got to take the asking.
Yeah, like asking for help, asking for mentoring or like going to your peers and asking questions. Also we have this thing, quite a big thing, I don't know if you've heard about it, called the internet.
I've heard of it vaguely.
It's quite a big thing. Giving it a go, asking for help, and then seeking the knowledge as well. But there's no myth to it, right? Like I didn't go to a school, didn't go to university, wasn't trained in this work, just sort of give it a go, listen to my head and my stomach and think, okay, what do I think is the best way forward? And so using intuition and your lived experience, like I've lived a working class, queer, fat life, so I know I can make that work with authority. And I think that's also a good thing to like remind yourself, like, who are you speaking to? And like what part of your experience are you talking about? Because if it's not about your experience at all, then probably you're making the wrong work.
Yeah, I also think you are your own point of difference, and that's really something that you should probably celebrate.
You're totally right about the double-edged thing about the title, because when I say I have made it, I mean it is totally tongue-in-cheek, right? But for when I was 13, just expelled from school, where I'm sitting now, I would have considered that I had made it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did everything within this. I made with my lovely chubby hands.
And that is a lovely note to end it on. So thank you so much, Scottee.
Thank you for having me.
And I'll see you in another video very soon. But no, thank you so much.
No, thank you. Because some people will know me from Instagram.
I'll link all of his links down below. You can slide into his DMs and everything.
Please do.
I normally do. Where's your jumper from?